Hi there, and welcome back to another video on my nearly dead YouTube channel. I'm just joking. This channel isn't dead, it's very much alive, and it's taken me a few months, but I'm finally getting back into the rhythm of creating videos. My objective is to make you a better data person. Today's video is about getting to know the difference between different tools. Stop. If you thought this was a tool video, then you are sorely mistaken. This video is about understanding that no matter which tool you end up taking, it is about the decision and outcome that you want to achieve. Let's talk about BI, or business intelligence. What is it really, and why do we need it? You can totally skip this section if you don't want to listen to this explanation. Many years ago, there was a discipline called business analysis. The objective was to inform the business about what types of things are working and which types of things are not. With such large volumes of data and ease of collection and storage, business intelligence has become a big thing. Effectively, it hasn't really changed. We still want to understand what is working best and what is working not so good in our business. The approaches we take and the tools we use have changed dramatically over the last 20 years. Now, I'm not that old. If you did think I was that old, then shame on you. I have over 10 years experience under my belt. To prove to you that all of these BI tools are basically the same, I have decided to make the same dashboard with the same data set in over 10 different BI tools. Before we dive into things, I just want to do a quick plug because this video is sponsored by myself. That's right, I launched my own live cohort on decision science that will be taking place at the end of October and into the first week of November. And if you're interested in learning more about how to take better decisions using data, check the link in the description below. So we've reached that part of the video where you've invested enough time to wonder, are you going to continue watching? Well, here's the reason to keep watching. I'm going to list the 12 BI tools that we are investigating in this video. They will all be listed as chapters. You can just skip ahead to that particular chapter. Or you can just skip ahead to the conclusion of the video, but I already kind of said that in the beginning, so why not just stick around? We're going to be covering 4 different types of BI tools in this video. The classic BI tools that you may have heard of before. Will it ever die tool, which I'm sure all of you can guess already which one that is going to be. We're also covering a few tools that are a little bit different and you probably haven't heard of before. And lastly, we are going to talk about the notebooks or modern data stack tools that aren't actually BI tools at all. So stick around, get comfy, because this is going to be an interesting one. The 12 tools that we're going to be covering today are in order: Looker Studio, Tableau, IBM Cognos, PowerPoint, Excel, Google Sheets, RAWGraphs, DataWrapper, PopSQL, Deepnote, Observable, and Count. Just before we get started, I want to say a word about the dataset I'm using. This is a public dataset of bike sharing data from the city of San Francisco. It is linked below in the description, and I have restricted the data to 1 year to make the analysis more straightforward for the purposes of this video. So Looker Studio by Google, or formerly known as Google Data Studio, is a software that is free to use, and you can connect it to a variety of data sources. I have connected it to my BigQuery instance that has this data set contained within it. One thing you'll notice is that this doesn't have dark mode, but you know, you take what you can get. So here I've already added our data source, and now I'm going to go click Create Report. I see that it already gives me an error, and that's actually really fantastic. You can see that the number is there, but then when you actually place the tile, it has an error. So I've actually redone the connection, and instead of using BigQuery this time, I've actually uploaded the CSV file directly. So we do actually have data here showing, so that's giving me some confidence. Now, because Looker Studio is the first tool that we're looking at today, we get to determine the baseline for all of the other dashboards that we're going to create today. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in a start date, and I would like to actually get the minimum start date as a sort of control item on this dashboard. 15th of September 2014, all right? Maybe we need to change a few style things here because we have some theme options. Let's go dark mode. I think this is going to make it a challenge because a lot of tools probably don't support dark mode. Okay, so apparently the dataset also ends on the 15th of September. Ah, this is the start date. So maybe we need to change this to end date. So we have a total of 15th to 16th of September 2014. Now I know that this isn't correct. I can already see other dates of 2014 in here. And this already illustrates one of the problems with Looker Studio. If you're not familiar with how the tool is configured, even if you know something is incorrect, you don't necessarily know how to fix it. And that's what's so frustrating about free tools sometimes. Let's move on because we're not fixing this anytime soon. The other thing I want to look at is the number of trips. So I'm going to take the trip ID here and I'm going to do a simple count for the number of trips. So it's also struggling to count the number of trips in the dataset, and a count distinct, while it can be resource intensive, I'm a little bit surprised that 350,000 rows is already challenging for Looker Studio. While that's loading, I'm going to load in another table for the zip code. So we have zip code, and then we will have a metric. We're going to count the number of trips. Now I'm going to add another chart in here. I want this to be the top 5 most used bicycles. I'm going to choose the bike number as the dimension, and I'm going to take the trip ID again. We can change the color as well, make that something more pretty. So there you have it, a completely broken dashboard. I guess we can see why this is a free tool. Effectively, Looker Studio allows you to very quickly and easily start making data visuals. But again, if you are using a free tool, you will sooner or later run into some kind of issue like we did, and you might not know how to solve it, which leads you to forums or communities, and it will cost you a lot of time. When someone says the word BI, then typically people think about Tableau. What is it like to use it as a free tool in the public version? So here I've already created a data source with my CSV file of the bike sharing dataset. Tableau has no problem in understanding and loading the data, which is to be expected for such a sophisticated tool. How can I change the color? Format worksheet, here we go. So I don't have a lot of experience with Tableau, but I don't think it's the most intuitive to learn. So we have rows as start date. And what if we want to change this to a measure minimum? Well, this is already better than Looker Studio because Looker wasn't even computing the right dates. Again, this is the web version of Tableau. So if you have been using the desktop version, it may vary in some way. So the maximum end date is the 24th of June, 2015. That's very interesting because the dataset has been restricted to 2014. So I'm not sure how it's getting that. So what does a new dashboard do? Oh, I'm confused. So what's a sheet? A sheet is just for data rows, and a dashboard, you can add sheets into it. Ah, oh, here's where we can do the nice background. Your page has become unresponsive. Let's wait. I think I broke it. Yep, I definitely broke it. So one wrong click and Tableau already says nope. So that has been my experience with Tableau so far. So I'm going to skip trying to debug that, and we're going to move on to the next tool. So when we talk about enterprise business intelligence tools, then one name tends to come up sometimes, and that is IBM Cognos. Personally, I have never used this tool ever. So it's going to be interesting to see how someone with a data analytics mindset approaches an entirely new tool that is built for enterprise. So I've created an account with IBM. The onboarding experience with IBM was surprisingly good, but they did ask me for a lot of personal data, and I'm a little bit concerned that they might call me. Upload data and start creating content. We exactly want to do that. We can upload supported file types that are stored in any location. So drag and drop, or just select our data set. Let's remember that this is our reference dashboard now, because that's the first one we made in Looker. And so every other tool should be able to do something like this. We can do a recommended dashboard, and we can choose a template. Oh, that's very interesting. Let's just take the 4 on the top for now. How do we do dark mode? Canvas. So they call this a canvas. Carbon X dark. Easy. So let's see what happens here. We need to have the start date. So we drag this into here, drop here to maximize. Okay, it's doing something. Create calculation. Here we go. Okay, it didn't like that because there's a lot of errors there. Validate. Here we go. The expression is valid. All right. That's not... I don't want to summarize it. I don't want this to be summarized. Why is it summarized? So there's 30 days left in my trial, which is not enough time to figure this out, in my opinion. Trip ID over here, and we can do count distinct of the trip ID. Summarize, count distinct. Ta-da, 325,953. Okay, yeah, this is correct. Your dashboard has been saved. So now we can go out of edit mode, and we now have our dashboard. Actually, my experience with Cognos was a lot more positive than I expected. I expected an enterprise tool to be very difficult to set up, very hard to configure, but everything seemed very straightforward. You would just have to spend a lot of time configuring it because it does have a lot of options for everything. We are going to try and make a dashboard in PowerPoint. So let's see how that goes. I'm using a German instance of PowerPoint, so apologize for some of the things being in German. This is PowerPoint Web, not the desktop version, because I haven't installed it on my computer. So we can start things off by trying to insert data. And if you see here, we can insert a table, but the table doesn't contain any data yet. So if we want to actually use data, we need to get it from somewhere else. Does the web version not allow you to do this? That's right. The web version of PowerPoint does not allow you to load any data in from spreadsheets or any significant amounts. You'd have to create all the tables by hand yourself. And I, for 325,000 rows of data, don't really feel like putting that in. So PowerPoint, sorry, you gotta go. We can, however, dive into the next section of tools, the Will It Ever Die section. And I'm sure most of you already know that Excel is basically the only tool in this category. It has over 700 million daily users, and that makes it pretty formidable. You have to consider that someone in your organization is most likely going to be using Excel no matter what you do. So I have loaded my data into a CSV file into the web version of Excel and converted it into an Excel file. The web version is pretty powerful. It does support a lot of rows. As you can see, we have something like 325,000 rows of data here, just like in the others. So it hasn't done any trimming or anything like that. Big caveat here, Excel is only in cells. So we have to style everything ourselves. We have to create everything ourselves. So the first thing I'm going to do is do the formatting. I guess the next thing would be to figure out how to create a grid. Oh, wait, I can put these in pixels. Oh, that's interesting. Excel allows you to do everything in pixels now. So we want to start with the minimum start date. So we're going to do a min start date, 0. Does it not know that this is a date? We might have to convert these to a date. So we're already at the first problem that you'd have to reformat your data for Excel because it doesn't know how to handle a timestamp. Okay, so this is now just a date. And then we can tell it that this is a date by telling it to consider it as a date. It is year, month, day. So we're just gonna copy that formula down the entire page by double clicking. So let's go back to our dashboard here and do a minimum of D, still giving us 0. Excel is not doing what I expect it to do for the min value. Maybe we have to tell it it's a date. 1900. Well, this is basically what I expected, that Excel's handling of dates, especially when you're working with different locales, becomes very challenging. Let's move on and see if we can actually do at least one of the charts in our reference dashboard in Looker. It's not loading my color anymore. What's happening here? Maybe Excel Web is struggling with 325,000 rows, but that seems very disappointing to me. This is very disappointing. So it's come up with a warning here. The server has lost connection. And I think this is a good summary of what it's like working with larger amounts of data in Excel. When you're trying to do things in a certain style, I think with a certain objective, I think it really quickly finds its limit. It's a bit disappointing because Excel touts itself as being a universal tool for a lot of different kinds of data. Let's be honest, these days, 325,000 rows of data isn't that much anymore. So maybe Excel, maybe it is time for you to go. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So if Excel can't do it, maybe Google can. Google has their own spreadsheet called Google Sheets that you can use in the cloud. Let's find out if Google Sheets has the same problems that Excel did. So I've also loaded my data into a CSV file in Google Sheets and then converted it to Google's own Sheets format. We're going to have to probably convert the dates because Google doesn't know what this is. So if I go to here, if I go to format number and I see automatic, I think I'm going to have to change this to date time. I'm not sure if this is a time or not. That's the thing. Because of the whole UTC string thing, we might have to take that out. Okay, so if these are dates, Google would know this. So it knows what we're doing. So let's create a dashboard. Let's call this overview. We're not going to have the possibility to create widgets or something like that. We have to do everything in individual cells. Or 50 pixels, like that. Resize rows. 50 pixels. So now these are perfect 50 by 50 pixel squares. Minimum value in a data set and the min of the start date is also 0, which is interesting because we converted it to a date, so it knows it's a date. We can check that it knows it's a date by doing isDate. Yes, it's a date. Is it a formatting problem? 1899, 1230. Similar problem to Excel, but not the same problem? All right, well, that's also a fail for Google, but let's see if we can try and do a chart. I'm going to highlight all these rows and then I'm going to say insert chart. Definitely something happening in the background. Much like Excel, you don't really know what it's doing and it's become unresponsive. We are going to wait and give it a chance. There we go. So we have a chart. The page is not so responsive, but there is a chart there. So after waiting for a bit, it does seem a bit more responsive, but it's still really, really slow. This is basically unusable. Well, I think we have everything that we need to know. So we see that these sort of classic will it ever die spreadsheet tools, they do have their place, but when we're analyzing larger data sets, in the web versions at least, it seems that they are not really keeping up with the times anymore. Kicking off the third section of tools in this video are some tools that you may not have heard of before, but I still like to consider them as BI tools. And the first one in this list is RAWGraphs. What I really like about RAWGraphs is I didn't need to make an account. So let's dive in and see what that experience is like. The first prompt I get is to paste my data, but I obviously have a little bit more than just copy paste, right? So I can go to this upload your data and I can upload the file that I need to. It processes it. It asks what my column separator is. It asks for 1,000 separator, decimals, what date everything is in, and it's alerting me to some of the issues in my file. So let's start with Wow, the choice of visuals here is incredible. I guess the easiest thing to do would be to take a tree map and then just blow up the label to be really big. So in the hierarchy, we can put start date, and then I can customize the chart, and then I can use start date as a label as well. Oh, wow. Okay. Can I make like some computations? How would I do that? And I can tell, oh, this seems to be a lot of data for RAWGraphs as well. We're going to give it a chance by clicking wait. Like I said, 300,000 odd rows shouldn't be considered big data today anymore. We're going to have to reload the page. So we have to start from the beginning. If we reload, there's no like state management, it seems. So if you do something, you kind of have to repeat that process over and over again. So if I were to stack on start date, what does that do? So it is very impressive, but as you can see, if you load too much data in here, it just ends up crashing. So once again, we're at the point where we ask ourselves, is 300,000 rows too much for the web? I think what it comes down to is probably infrastructure. That being said, let's continue. So here's another tool in the kind of you didn't expect to be in this video category. DataWrapper is a really interesting and exciting tool to allow you to make visualizations, and you can even try it out without an account. So let's dive in and see where it takes us. So here is the entry screen for DataWrapper. As I said, you can just click try out DataWrapper without signing up, and it takes you directly to this 4-step process. The first thing we want to do is we want to upload our data. So I've uploaded the CSV, and already I can see there's no response, which is concerning. And again, we have the very classic unresponsive page, but we see that this thing is now filled. But we're going to proceed and see maybe there's some kind of, oh wow, that is very unexpected. Are 350,000 rows really too much? Let's reload and see. Let's try that again. I'm just gonna upload, I'm gonna wait, not gonna do anything, accept my data, hopefully not have any issues. Okay, it's loaded. I'm going to proceed. We're having trouble saving the changes. Please check your internet connection or contact our support. We can see that these web uploads tend to run into the same problem. Because I didn't get a chance to do anything here, it's a bit unfortunate, but this is also the reality. Look, I am putting up all these tools against the same bar. We have the same data set, the same requirements, and all the tools are being measured in the same way. So if one of them can't step up to that, then maybe the measurement bar is too high. I'm thinking it's more of an issue that the measurement bar is sufficient, but some of these tools are not made to handle that kind of data set, which is very disappointing. So here is a tool that belongs in the category of BI tools, but you may not have come across it before, because it is actually known as an editor for SQL. And this is PopSQL or PopSQL. I am looking forward to trying out PopSQL purely because it is one of the only tools that allows you to write SQL queries and also visualize at the same time. So this is the PopSQL interface. I haven't loaded my data into PopSQL yet, and I wanted to do that together with you because it's my first time using the web version of PopSQL. So the first thing to do here is to look at how can we connect our data. I think there's a schemas here with some public tables. Here, manage connections. Well, our data is on BigQuery, so we have to create a service account for BigQuery. Does PopSQL not have support for CSV? No, it seems not. Let's see, can we actually create charts? Shared dashboards, private dashboards. Bike share 2014. Add a query. Oh, there you go. So we actually get exactly what we want, and we can resize this as well. I have successfully connected my BigQuery instance to PopSQL. So we can see here we have all our data sets, and if I go into MISC, we can see we have a table here called Bike Share 2014. So my first shared query, start date. BigQuery permission denied. Wait, I'm using OAuth. Why is it giving me permission denied? Is this the same issue we had with Looker? So there is still some permissions problem. So it's very unfortunate that I ran into this permissions issue, and PopSQL doesn't support any CSV files. So I don't see a way around that for the moment. From what we saw of the tool and how it's configured, I think it wouldn't have been an issue to create those charts because you can basically just write the code for it. And this is somewhat of an atypical situation. A lot of people using data don't actually know how to write SQL, but a lot of data analysts and data people do. So this is more tailored to those people. Are you still here? Congratulations, because you've made it to the most exciting part of today's video. This is the section where I'm looking at tools that aren't like classic BI tools at all. The first of these three tools is called Deepnote, and they are calling themselves a hybrid notebook. Let's take a look at it and see if we can actually create a dashboard in it. So like a few of the other tools, I completed the onboarding for Deepnote beforehand, as I have to enter a lot of personal data that I don't want to share with all of you. And I have imported my dataset here as a CSV file. Right away, we can see the structure of the notebook. You can add headings, paragraphs, different types of text blocks, support everything in Markdown. So if I write H1, sorry, that's not official Markdown. There we go, right? So we're going to call this Bike Share 2014. Running the notebook effectively runs all of the code blocks that you have in here. Now, Deepnote supports both Python and SQL. I don't really know what the visuals look like here. If we reference our dashboard that we made earlier, we are probably not going to be able to achieve the same format, but we can go through the different elements of the dashboard and try and visualize them in a similar way. Can Deepnote handle dates just as well as Enterprise BI? So it is executing, and it has given us the first value, which is the 1st of January at shortly past midnight. So that does seem to be correct. We could probably clone this. Then we don't need to write everything from the beginning. And then we can just change this to max end date as end date of dataset. And now I can just run this cell. I don't need to execute the whole notebook again. 2015-06-24. That's very interesting. So the maxed end date of 2015 is correct. So everything is working as expected. Top 5 most used bicycles. Order by 2, descending, limit 5. There we go. Now you could see that writing this in code, if you know how to write SQL, was actually a lot faster. But can we visualize this? Let's see. Bar chart. So this is the SQL frame is still here. And then there's a bar chart, and we can even choose the orange color like before. So obviously from a layout perspective, it's a little bit different than a classic dashboard. So it's a top to bottom layout. Essentially, you can achieve something very similar to a dashboard, but I guess it remains questionable about whether someone is going to read from top to bottom. So you would have to think about how to structure the information a little bit differently in a notebook. My personal experience was very positive. I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't think that you can create a classic dashboard layout in it, but I also don't think that's the intention. This next tool on the list is also a notebook. It's called Observable. So as we know from the notebook standard, it's not going to be possible from a layout perspective, but let's see what the visualization options are like and see what we get out of it. As with Deepnote, I have loaded my data in advance as a kind of data frame into the notebook, and I have already seen that it's doing a little bit of visualization on the top of the columns. Observable allows you to write both JavaScript and SQL, which is an interesting choice. I think the JavaScript is for a lot of granular control over the charts. If I type select min start date, should already give me data. Oh, that was quick. Okay, so that's correct. So we have the correct data here. It's obviously doing that. We could technically include both the start date and the end date in the same thing, because obviously we cannot create individual cell layouts. Wow, that was really fast. Let's try and make a chart. And this should give us the same visual as before. Correct. But let's make this into a chart. So how can we publish this as a source? Well, it seems that we can't really get the visual that we want. without somehow customizing it. From my understanding, the real power of Observable lies in the ability to be able to customize the charts to your heart's content, but doing it with JavaScript. So the short answer about Observable is if you know how to code, you can create any visual you want. And given enough time, I think you can create beautiful visuals, because I've seen from the example dashboards on their website that some of them are absolutely incredible. I personally know how to code JavaScript and SQL, but don't think it's worth my time to spend that time programming charts. What's your take on coding charts? Is it worth your time? Let me know in the comments below. You've made it to the end, to the last tool on the list, Count. Big disclaimer here. I've used Count before in the past. I've even made videos using Count, but this video is in no way endorsed by Count or any of the other tools. I've already spent some time setting up my workspace, so I have my data loaded as a CSV file. I'll be writing SQL, even though Count supports Python as well. Looking back at our reference dashboard, we can start again with these start and end dates. What's cool about Count is it's not a notebook. It's more of a canvas, if you're familiar with tools like Miro or other whiteboarding tools. So we can actually create whatever we want here. We can just make this background a lot darker. Dataset start date. Now, how this works is similar to the notebooks. You get these kind of data frames, and then you say, okay, I have a SQL cell, and I want to select, for example, min start date from Bikeshare 2014, and I get the same result as we had before. What's interesting here is I can directly select the visual as well. Card is what they call it. The day. So we know that the first day of our data set is 1st of January 2014. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to do the max end date, and I'm going to do day as well. 24th of June 2015. So as we see, we already have the dataset end date and we have the start date. So the rest of the dashboard is pretty straightforward. We're trying to create a view where we can see which bikes have the most trips. So we could write this in SQL, but I think we might be able to do it directly in a visual. While it doesn't look exactly the same, and I'm probably just doing something wrong, we can most certainly create a dashboard like the Looker Studio one within Count. And I think more importantly, we can place the elements a lot easier. So you could tell that I had more experience in Count, but I would still struggle to make some of the charts look exactly like I wanted it to. And this is essentially what it comes down to for each of these tools, is that if you don't have the relevant experience, you can't actually achieve what you want. Looking back at the 12 different tools that we looked at today, there are some things that I want to say in order to wrap up this video. We made a reference dashboard in Looker Studio at first, just because it was the first one that we did. That shouldn't mean that that is the bar for all the other tools, but implicitly that kind of became the measurement. And I think that was actually a really interesting process, because that for me represents the most classic version of a dashboard that most people would talk about today. Now, we saw that many of the newer and more modern tools aren't actually capable of creating a dashboard. Essentially, we collect data so that we can make an analysis in order to make decisions, in order to decide what things to do and what things not to do. By choosing to make the same dashboard in 12 different tools, I showed that at the end of the day, which tool you pick doesn't matter. It matters on what your goals are. So I'm urging you to reflect on what your data analytics goals are before you pick a tool and before you dive into an analysis. I'd still like to know which tool surprised you the most. For me, it always depends on the message and what we're trying to get out of it. Just like you wouldn't tell a contractor to only use a screwdriver, no stakeholder has the right to tell you to only use one particular tool. I hope this video was interesting for you, so I'd really love to hear in the comments below what you thought, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.